Snow drifts through the narrow lanes of the market town, each flake a pale ember sinking into the grooves of ancient cobblestones. The street is hushed, save for the shuffle of boots and the distant bray of a tethered mule. Beneath the muted sky, a woman moves as though each step must be weighed, her head bowed. Her hair bound in a coarse linen veil that hides the lines of her face. She passes the pillory, where another woman, younger perhaps, though hunger makes ages indistinct, shivers with wrists locked in oak, her breath ghosting the air. Our bare feet are red against the snow, the skin split where frost has claimed it. A child stares from the crowd, clutching the hem of his mother's skirt, but no one speaks. The air reeks of tallow smoke, of wool cloaks dampened by sleet, of the faint rot that clings to winter meat in the butcher's stall. The market's noise, the bartering, the calls for bread or salt, falters as the bell from the abbey begins to toll. Its sound travels through the mist like a summons, though not to worship. Each peal is heavy, as if the metal itself knows it calls the living to judgment. Men in the livery of the bailiff move toward the hall, their boots leaving shallow prints in the slush. The woman in the veil follows at a measured pace, her hands hidden in the folds of her mantle, though they tremble as she passes the iron-bound doors. Inside, the stone breathes cold. Torches spit and gutter, their light caught in the damp sheen of the walls. At the far end, the bench of the magistrate rises like a shadow against the narrow stained glass, the colors dulled by the gray light outside. The accused kneels, her skirts damp from the flagstones, her voice, if it can be called that, barely more than a thread. She speaks her name in her village tongue, soft and low, but it carries no weight here. The scribe bends over the parchment, his quill scratching with a slow finality. Stroke a tether, drawing her deeper into the silence the law demands. The magistrate does not look at her. His gaze rests instead on the document, the Latin clauses that strip her of inheritance, of standing, of the right to speak on her own behalf. Around her, the court is a forest of faces, some curious, some indifferent, none willing to meet her eyes for long. Outside, the bell still tolls, though its echo is muffled now, caught in the thick walls. Between each chime is a pause so complete it feels like the air itself has stopped moving. Somewhere in that stillness, she remembers her mother's voice, reciting the words of a prayer as they kneaded bread at the hearth. She mouths the first line now, unheard, her lips barely moving. A guard shifts his weight, the links of his chainmail whispering like restless bees. The scribe dips his quill again, and the ink spreads dark as a bruise on the parchment. With that mark, the verdict is no longer a possibility, but a certainty. When the doors open, the light outside has already changed. Snow falls thicker now, blurring the outlines of the street. The woman in the veil steps out into it, the cold clinging to her skin. Behind her, the abbey bell strikes once more, though softer, as if even the metal grows weary. Ahead, the pillory stands empty, but its shadow stretches long across the stones. A reminder that in this town, names can vanish faster than footprints in snow. She pulls her mantle closer, not for warmth, but to hold the silence against her, the same silence that will follow her home. Sit at her table and lie beside her at night. Somewhere beyond the square, another door will close, another lock will turn, and the world will move on, as though she had never spoken at all. Candlelight trembles in the draught of the manorial hall, its glow bending and stretching across damp stone like a spirit trying to escape. Shadows swell on the faces of those gathered, hiding some eyes, hollowing others. The air is thick with the smell of wet wool and extinguished torches. The faint metallic temps of the ink that pools at the tip of the scribe's quill. He leans low over the parchment, his wrist moving in careful arcs, each stroke steady, final. The words he writes are not hers. They belong to a law older than her birth, forged in a tongue she cannot read, meant to shape her life as if she were parchment too. Marked, folded, sealed, and set aside. At the far end she kneels on the flagstones, the cold pressing through her gown until her bones feel carved from ice. Her head remains bowed, not from reverence but to hide the way her hands clench together, thumbs twisting in a small, relentless motion. The veil that drapes from her wimple brushes the floor, its hem stained by the damp. She can feel the eyes of the hall upon her, not in sympathy, but in the quiet. In a praising way, one might examine a cask of wine before declaring its worth. Beyond the shuttered windows, the orchard sleeps beneath frost. The trees that came with her dowry stand skeletal against the gray sky, their limbs brittle, stripped of both leaf and fruit. They are hers in name only, bound now by the ink that darkens the scribe's page. She remembers the spring when she first walked between them. Her new husband's hand on her arm, the scent of blossom curling through the air. She had believed them to be a promise. Today, they are only a memory fenced in by law. The magistrate's voice rolls over the chamber, low and unyielding, like distant thunder gathering on the horizon. He recites clauses in the rhythm of litany, naming her rights as one might name the dead, only to lay them to rest again. Her voice is absent from the room as if it were a thing that could be taken from her and set upon a high shelf. She thinks of speaking just once, if only to hear herself, but the knowledge of what would follow roots her tongue in silence. A sound from above breaks the monotony. A raven, perched on the battlements, calls once, sharp and jagged, before taking flight into the pale sky. For a moment, her eyes lift toward the sound, following it beyond the confines of the hall. The bird's wings are black against the light, unbound by any law she knows. She forces her gaze downward again, the image of those wings pressed into her mind like a secret she dares not tell. The scribe sands the ink, blows gently, and rolls the parchment closed. A cord of red wool binds it tight, sealing it in its silence. When the hall begins to empty, the cold rushes in deeper, as though the air itself has taken sides against her. She remains kneeling until a guard's shadow falls across her. Only then does she rise, slow and deliberate, each movement like the turning of a key she does not hold. Outside, the frost still clings to the orchard, each branch glittering with a fragile light. Somewhere beyond, the raven's cry carries again. Faint. Almost lost. Before the heavy doors close behind her and the sound is gone. In the gray hush before dawn, the cloister garden lies in a fragile stillness. Frost blooms on the edges of each flagstone, the air sharp with the mingled scent of rosemary and cold earth. Her steps are slow, deliberate, as though the ground itself might remember her passing. Beneath her cloak, the wool shift clings to her with the damp of the morning, and each breath leaves a pale cloud that lingers before fading into the dim. She pauses beside the fountain, its marble rim crusted with ice, and watches a faint curl of steam rise from the water's still heart. The only warmth here is if the stone itself were exhaling. Beyond the garden wall, faint sounds begin to stir. The creak of cartwheels, the bark of a dog, the first call of a cockerel. But within these walls, there is no such awakening. Here, only the convent bell dares speak, its tone deep and unhurried, summoning all to the rhythm of the hours. She lifts her gaze toward the sound, feeling its weight settle over her like the veil upon her head. A covering, a confinement, and a mark. Once, there had been laughter. Wild, unmeasured laughter in the open fields behind her father's house, where the grass bent like waves and the wind tangled her hair. She remembers running until her lungs burned, until the world felt boundless. But here, laughter is not only forbidden, it is a sin that demands confession. Joy, like hunger or longing, must be pressed down into silence, its edges blunted by obedience. The vows had not been her choosing. They were the coin by which her father purchased relief from debt, the parchment her hand was forced to sign with trembling ink. Now her life is measured in the steady scratch of quill on vellum, the quiet ache of her back from ours bent over the scriptorium's bench. She copies the words in Latin with a hand both skilled and restrained, knowing their meaning, but never daring to shape them differently. Even an accidental flourish could be seen as presumption, a sin of pride against the authority that watches from every corner. In the prioress's chamber, high on a shelf where the candlelight never quite reaches, there rests a small locked chest. Within it lies the last letter she wrote to her family, the one sealed with red wax, pressed with the mark of her mother's ring. She had poured her longing into those lines, describing the way the cold gnawed at the stones at night, how the wind rattled the shutters like a restless spirit. She wrote of the ache to hear her mother's voice, even once before the seasons turned again. But the letter was never sent. The prioress received it with a measured nod, placed it in the chest, and turned the key. Its seal remains unbroken, its words trapped in darkness, as heavy as the silence she carries in her chest. Now, as the bell tolls again, she draws her cloak tighter and steps away from the fountain. The rosemary beneath her feet crushes easily, releasing a faint sweetness that vanishes too quickly into the cold. She passes beneath the stone archway toward the scriptorium, the world narrowing with each step. Somewhere behind her, the steam still rises from the fountain's heart, but she does not look back. The day's hours are already claimed, and her voice, like the letter in the locked chest, must remain unheard. The air inside the court is close and heavy, thick with the scent of damp wool, of bodies pressed into cloaks that have carried the winter in with them. Chains hang from the wall behind her, their iron scent biting through the smoke that curls from the torches. She stands alone in the hollow of the chamber, the flagstones cold through the soles of her shoes, her breath trembling in the stale air. Before her, the panel of robed men sits in shadow, their eyes drawn not to her face, but to the frayed and muddied hem of her kirtle, as if her worth were measured there in the threads and stains. Her accuser speaks in French, not the lilting French of a song, but the clipped, sharp syllables of the law. It is the language of the crown, the courts, the records that will outlive her. She knows only the round, warm sounds of her village speech, words made for hearth and field, not judgment and decree. Each phrase falls on her as rain on stone, cold and relentless, seeping into her without finding any root. She stares at the worn grooves of the table before her, tracing them with her eyes, as if they might somehow shield her from the weight of the words. The clerk at the side of the hall moves without hurry, dipping his quill into ink black as spilled night. The parchment before him is smooth, expectant, waiting to be scarred with the marks that will decide her fate. She watches the slow, deliberate motion as he draws a single line, one stroke that will take her children from her arms, not by theft, but by law. She feels the shape of their names in her mouth, the weight of their small bodies when she lifted them from sleep. Oh, those names will not be written here. Only the absence of her will be recorded. The magistrate's gaze passes over her like a shadow, not stopping, not seeing. The judgment is not about her, not truly. It is about the keeping of order, the preservation of rules drawn by hands that will never hold a child at night, never bleed in childbirth, never know what it is to be told that love is not hers to claim. Her fingers twitch against the fabric at her sides, but she keeps them still, the way she learned to as a girl when silence was safer than truth. Beyond the heavy oak doors, the bell for the midday meal rings, deep, resonant, calling others to warmth, to bread, to voices shared over a table. And here, the sound barely reaches. It comes to her dulled, swallowed by the stone, as though the court itself wishes her to forget there is a world beyond this moment. The voices of the men resume, droning in their measured rhythm, the words sliding past her like water that cannot be caught. She lowers her eyes to the floor and sees her shadow stretching out before her, thin and bowed, shaped by the torchlight into something not entirely human. Somewhere beyond the walls, her children may be playing, or sleeping, or calling her name. She will not be there to answer. The clerk's quill lifts, the ink drying in sharp final lines. When the judgment is spoken, she hears it as if from a distance, the meaning heavy, even if the words are not hers to understand. As she turns to leave, the air shifts. A draft slips through the room, carrying with it the faintest trace of baking bread from the kitchens beyond. It is warm, almost sweet, and gone too quickly, leaving only the cold. The door closes behind her with the sound of wood against stone, a sound like a lock turning, like a life sealed away. Smoke drifts in thin, languid spirals from the hearth, as if reluctant to rise, curling and folding upon itself before dissolving into the low beams above. The air here is warm in theory, but its comfort does not reach the woman crouched on the rush-covered floor. Her hands rest upon her knees, knuckles pale with stillness. Before her sits a small wooden chest, its surface worn smooth by years of touch, the lid carved with lilies, whose petals have long surrendered their edges to time. She opens it slowly, as though each hinge might groan in protest. Inside lies her wedding girdle, a narrow band of embroidered silk, once the color of ripened wheat, now dulled to the hue of old parchment. The clasp glints faintly in the dim light, its metal cold against her fingertips. She traces the tiny cross etched upon it, feeling the ridges as though they might cut her. This was once the binding of her joy, the seal of a vow spoken beneath bells and before witnesses. Now it is a relic she is forbidden to wear, stripped away not by death, but by decree. Her husband invoking the law of custody as easily as one might draw a curtain. The hearth's embers shift, sending up a muted crackle. She does not turn toward it. Instead, her gaze slips to the narrow slit of the shutter, where a wedge of the outside world presses through. Beyond, the street is alive with small feet pounding cobblestones. Children chase a wooden hoop, their laughter striking the walls and bouncing back like bright chimes. For a moment she watches them, the way the smallest one trips, and recovers, the way the eldest throws back her head as she runs, hair flying free in the wind. The smell of salt reaches her, carried inland by a restless harbor breeze. It is sharp and clean, a scent that tugs at something deep inside her, not quite memory, not quite hope, but an ache shaped like escape, Maine. She pictures the port, masts swaying like silent witnesses, ropes creaking against the tide, gulls carving the sky with their cries. She imagines stepping aboard a vessel, the wooden planks trembling under her feet as the shore draws away. The thought is fragile, almost foolish. The port is far. The sheriff's men are near. Her hand hovers over the girdle again. She remembers the day it was fastened around her, the whispered blessing in Latin, the weight of eyes upon her as she became what the law required her to be. She remembers the pride in her father's stance, silence in her mother's. And now she remembers the moment it was taken from her. The document sealed, the words spoken in the cold presence of men who would not meet her eyes. She lifts the girdle once more, feeling the faint scent of lavender still clinging to the fabric. Her thumb presses into the embroidery, as if pressing into the past itself. Then, with a care that is almost tenderness, she lays it back in the chest. The lid closes softly, but in the stillness, the sound feels final, like earth on a grave. The smoke from the hearth coils toward her as she sits unmoving. Outside, the laughter fades down the street. Somewhere beyond the harbor's edge, the tide turns. She lowers her gaze to the floor, her lips parting in a whisper. Not a prayer, not yet. Only a breath, a silence that waits to decide whether it will break.